Hello and welcome, fellow motorsports fans. It's been a brilliant week of racing, and as always, I am here to tell you all about it. This week's highlight was, without a doubt, the 8 Hours of Bahrain, the WEC season finale, and well, it was definitely an exciting race throughout, even if the title battle wasn't maybe the close Toyota versus Toyota fight that we had hoped for, because Earl Bamber decided to, you know, be a little bit ambitious into turn one, locked up the number 2 caddy, and went straight into the number 7 Toyota, spun Conway out, and then essentially was one big recovery drive from there. To be fair, it turned out the Toyota was super quick compared to everything else, so Conway did manage to claw his way back to P2 within an hour or two. That was a really, really quick and rapid recovery. Unfortunately, though, there was no way they were ever going to catch the number 8, and so the 8 deservedly won the title after what has been more Toyota versus Toyota throughout the season than we had maybe hoped for. But then again, it does make sense with a new class of cars for most of the competitors. And honestly, I am also happy that it's not just a purely BOP based class where the car development doesn't really matter because you can always BOP your way back into contention. So it is difficult for WEC to strike the middle ground there, and I think they've done a reasonable job this year all around. It wasn't just Toyota versus Toyota for the lead though. We also had Porsche versus Ferrari for best of the rest. And first of all, the Jota number 38 Porsche was probably the quickest Porsche of all four of them. It's four Porsches, isn't it? So that was quite exciting. It's not the factory Porsches for once. The number 6, though, to be fair, had a lot of bad luck. As always, it was the quicker of the two factory Porsches, but also got involved in some lap 1 mess. Dropped Lawrence Vantor down to, I can't remember, around P7 or 8 early on lap 1, so that was a bit to recover from. Nevertheless, great to see Jota actually fighting and winning the fights against the factory cars near the end of a race. That was really good to see. They could have had the podium, they were quicker than the Ferraris, and then unfortunately Da Costa got a drive-through penalty for, I believe it was track limits, if I remember correctly. Let me quickly see. Unsafe rejoin it was, never mind, unsafe rejoin. So yeah, that was a bit of a waste, but it did allow us to have a very, very aggressive and intense Ferrari versus Ferrari between Fuoco and Pierre Guidi for P3. Fuoco did really go in with, his elbows all the way out. It was interesting to see, and it looked very close to producing a classic Ferrari F1 moment with the two cars taking each other out. So, spicy definitely for last race of the season. LMP2, the final race of this very, very good and always delivering class. I'm still sad to see it go, but then again, it'll live on in ELMS and keep delivering there. It was a very weird race with two cars taking the lead before subsequently getting heavy penalties for running illegal tire pressures. First, it was the number 10 Vector Sports car, which got a magnificent lead early on with Aubrey just running away from the entire field, and then got a 90-second stop-and-go penalty. Excuse me. And later the same thing happened to Josh Pearson in the number, I believe it's the 23 United Autosports. So LMP2 teams being a bit tricky with the tire pressures, and it affecting the lead of the race twice is definitely quite an interesting thing. I am glad though the race afterwards turned into WRT versus Prema, a proper 2v2 between with all four cars involved. The 31 WRT actually looked to be the favorite, and for a lot of it, before then the 41 took the lead on the final stint or the penultimate stint. I'm not entirely sure anymore. Either way, I think they were on a favorable strategy towards the end of the race anyway. So yeah, I'm glad Delatraz and the boys got to finish it in style. Delatraz and Kubica is an incredibly strong combination of drivers for a LMP2. So yeah, I'm glad we got one last hurrah before they had to depart to bigger and better things, hopefully next year. In the case of Delatraz, obviously, we know he's going to be in one of the Acuras, which I am really looking forward to a full season campaign from him over there. Now, GTE, Bit of a weird one this time around, as in the Corvette was nowhere. That's very unusual. It doesn't happen very often. I guess the BOP was quite unfavorable this time around, but it did allow finally for the Iron Dames victory, the long-awaited Iron Dames victory. Bovey put it on pole for the last ever GTE race, very fitting, and they were the leading proper car. I say proper car because there was the 60 Iron Lynx as well, which took the lead really early on because they were the only car not starting their gentleman driver because they couldn't, because Schiavone was too ill to drive. And so it turned into this really sad story of Cressoni and Picariello driving away from everybody else as they had to put their bronzes in, but essentially just racing against the clock, and they had to retire the car when it was clear that Schiavone would not be able to do his mandated drive time. So, all around, deserved for the Iron Dames, obviously. Bit sad that we didn't get to see the alternate strategy for the 60 play out, but I'm pretty confident that Schiavone would have dropped the car back down anyway. He tends to be one of the worst drivers off the grid, but yeah, not the exit from GTE that they would have hoped for sure. Really, really happy for the Iron Dames. Other noteworthy thing would probably be Ian James with an exceptional charge early on in the north. Well, it's not the Northwest AMR anymore, is it? What's the... I should know this off the top of my head, really, but I don't. What is the... It's still run as Northwest AMR, apparently. Okay, either way, the 98 Aston Martin, call it whatever you like. He had a really, really fantastic opening stint to charge his way through the field, and then unfortunately eventually came back down to earth, but they still got their first podium of the year, so nothing to complain about, really, I'd say. Catch my breath, give me a second. We also had a new series debut this time around, which was the Porsche Cup Middle East Challenge. And I was really looking forward to this, first of all, because I do like different cars other than F1 and the yearly WEC thing racing around Bahrain. And second of all, because Robert De Haan announced his participation quite early on. And as you may or may not have already noticed, I am very excited about this guy, 18-year-old Dutchman who's really, really quick in a cup car. And he did prove it here, he did prove it around Bahrain. Although, to be fair, the overall field was not as good as I maybe had hoped for, with only, let's say, 5 proper pro drivers, as in young aspiring pro drivers, and the rest of them really just amateurs. But nonetheless, it was really exciting racing between Robert De Haan and Rookie of the Year in the Carrera Cup Germany, Theo Overhaus. They had pretty good battles in both races. Robert De Haan did win both times on track, but in race 1 he did get a post-race penalty, which dropped him way down to, we can see over here, okay, only to P3, but still dropped him way down. The revelation of the field for me really was Bönnighausen, who I'd never heard of before, but he was really, really quick, and he was almost able to match Overhaus and Robert De Haan. Not entirely, and not as much during the second race, where he was struggling to carve his way through the field after a bad quali, but nonetheless definitely an exciting driver, considering he was going up against pretty strong opposition and did really well. So I'm waiting to see what he can do for the rest of the season. Now then, TCR World Tour finally beginning its Australian part of the season, and therefore also, unfortunately, its last part of the season. Nonetheless, 3 really, really good races. The first time during the entire TCR World Tour that the local teams actually had the upper hand on all the international guests. As in, when I say the locals, it was mainly just Will Brown. Will Brown had the upper hand on everybody, winning all 3 races. Well, actually, that's wrong. Winning all 3 races for TCR Australia, and then getting back-to-back wins and a podium at least in the 3rd race. Still insane stuff. I'm just checking. Oh yeah, exactly. Brown did get a penalty. That's why he didn't win the... that's why he got demoted to 3rd in the final race. He got P2 on the road. That's why I was confused. P2 on the road behind Huff, and then a 5-second jump start penalty. Either way, all 3 races action-packed. I think the most outstanding drive was Brown's recovery in the second race from P10 on the grid all the way to a win is exceptional. I don't think I have to really say any more about this. But it also produced the classic TCR, just pure carnage races. The third one, I believe, had the most, let's say, casualties from the front runners with Ascona, Elache, Girolami, and I am forgetting somebody. Matching also getting involved in incidents very early on in the race. Ted Björk had just incident after incident in a lot of these races, if I remember correctly. So it was carnage all around. Has definitely shaken up the World Tour Championship, with Mikulis now leading again ahead of Rob Huff, and Elache dropped down to third. Ascona dropped way behind with essentially just 3 pretty poor races, I suppose. It was very intense. The moment of the weekend definitely, though, had nothing to do with the normal TCR World Tour racing, had nothing to do with TCR Australia racing, and it had all to do with one of my favorite moments in motorsports, spontaneous rain, or, well, unforeseen drop of wet from... just I don't know how to describe this, just watch. We have this few second moment here, and this field of world-class touring car drivers, yeah, you may or may not have seen this already. The race had to be red flagged after this, believe it or not, but yeah, that was race 1, and after this, the rest of the weekend seemed to be really tame, even though it was 3 really, really good races. But this was something else, and truly spectacular to watch. Definitely check out race 1 and 2. The third one maybe not as much, but race 1 and 2 if you want some proper entertainment from good old touring car racing and a bit of crazy. Alright, let's move on to the last of the sports car section, which is Trans Am. And before we get into the actual race, I just want to point out, dear Trans Am website team, how is it possible to run a championship and it not be possible to figure out the standings after the conclusion of said championship? This was the last round of the year, and I cannot see the standings anywhere. I believe I know who won, if there wasn't any post-race penalties or something that I'm not aware of. But I still, this is very weird. Like, why would you have a championship without actually promoting the title fight at all? Anyway, that aside, for those of you not watching Trans Am, essentially the main 2 reasons for me to do it this year was Conor Zilisch, and, well, I'm sure I mispronounce his name still, because it reads like a German name. I want to pronounce it more German if I can. And Brent Cruz, who very much doesn't read like a German name, which is quite good because he is also very, very American. In fact, both are. But more outstanding is that they're both incredibly young. Cruz is only 15, I believe, and Zilisch just turned 17 a few weeks or months ago, like over the course of the season anyway. You may or may not have seen Zilisch in the MX-5 Cup. He is a semi-regular over there. He's had a couple wins over the year as well, like just an fantastic all-round driver for his age. And I mean, he is going up against people much older than him in this series, and essentially every race I've seen, I've not watched the entire Trans Am season, but every race I've seen him participate in, he's been challenging for the win. Cruz, not quite as much, but also always at the front, and must have won races while I wasn't paying attention to the series, because he actually got the championship. Zilisch, traditionally very bad luck. Again, this race, he took the lead and then had some sort of puncture or mechanical failure, took him out of the race, and also caused the first safety car of the race after about halfway distance, and then the race turned into a bit of a shit show, for lack of a better phrase. It was just back-to-back safety cars, 3 or 4 of them in a row, before the field finally settled back down, changed up the entire order, and then all of a sudden Thomas Annunziata got the win after Thomas Merrill and, I forgot his first name, Hearn. What's his first name? Either way, Merrill and Hearn collided, battling for the lead, took each other out, or at least out of win contention, and then, yeah, Thomas Annunziata ended up with a very random win. Merrill, with this move, more or less just handed the championship to Cruz, but I believe he... Well, again, I can't check, unfortunately, but from what the commentator said, I believe Cruz would have won anyway, unless something outstanding would have happened. But, yeah. Great racing, cool cars, mediocre production and terrible promotion of the title battle, Trans Am really is a confusing and frustrating series, but I'd still recommend to check it out. Now then, really getting into this. Not a lot of news this week, unfortunately, or fortunately, otherwise this would be an hour long again. But we had one piece of news, which is Dorian Parr crowned 2023 FIA WEC Revelation of the Year. And if you've not seen Dorian Parr at all this year, well, go watch WEC, focus on her, and you'll see why she's called the Revelation of the Year. She's been fantastic in LMP2. She has to more or less compare herself to Danny Kvyat and Mirko Bortolotti. Not entirely, because she's a silver among pros, but still, and she's doing really, really well. She's not the one dragging her team down by any stretch. In fact, compared to the silvers, she's probably, I'd say, in the top 3 of the silvers this year. Bit difficult to judge maybe, but for sure better than, for example, Rui Andrade, who got promoted to gold and she didn't, which I still don't understand. Anyway, just wanted to say this because it's a feel-good storyline for all those into, first of all, young talented drivers, and then bonus that we actually have competent female racers. You just have to look beyond single-seaters. Okay. Talking about single-seaters, Formula 1 in Brazil at Interlagos. Either way, sprint race weekend, we still had the discussion about are sprints good or not. I think sprints like this prove that we can talk about the competitive merit of them, but they sure as hell are entertaining. You can't deny that, I don't think. Obviously, we know who won both without checking, but the battle for P2 was pretty good in both races. Well, or at least the outcome of the battle was pretty nice in both races, with Lando Norris actually taking P2 both in the race. Just make sure I'm not going crazy. No, in the race and during the sprint. He was much quicker, like those two were much quicker than the rest of the field in the sprint, although it has to be said that Piastri was sort of caught up elsewhere. It's not like he just didn't have the pace to go with Norris. More interesting, like how do I say this? The most exciting thing for me about this weekend in particular was how close the quali is. If you look beyond Verstappen, it looks like there's this big block of 6 teams plus Paris. So in terms of the car, I'd say 7 teams that can go up against each other, more or less. Obviously, it changes a bit week to week, but in general, 7 competitive teams, and then you've got Alfa Romeo, Williams, and Haas, which is just unfortunate. And then even those can do, we know with Williams, we also know with Haas, they can do damage in quali. It's really just AlphaTauri just has barely any upside. They also had to retire both cars in the race, if I remember correctly. Then again, that was due to Ferrari engine, at least in one case. I'm not sure if we know the reason for both. Yeah. Aside how tight the pack is, though, obviously the massive story for everybody watching was probably the last lap or closing stages battle between Fernando Alonso and Checo Perez for the podium position for P3. And it was just fantastic to see Alonso in action. Obviously, it's whenever there's a fantastic battle to remember popping up in F1, it's usually Alonso involved in it. And more often than not, it's Alonso defending against a much faster car. Flashbacks to Hungary a few years ago. And yeah, it was one of those, not quite as crazy. Obviously, the car diff not quite as big, but still, he played it really, really well, showed all the decades of experience to, defend P3 just about over the line. Yeah, fantastic. This is the sort of finishes we want to see to make the sport exciting. And yeah, it's not for P1, but honestly, who cares really, right? It's just we are here to be entertained, and this definitely delivered big time. There was also the Brazilian F4 around Interlagos, but as far as I know, the round wasn't streamed anywhere, which is odd because usually Brazilian F4 is just streamed on YouTube, probably due to media rights with it being on an F1 weekend, probably similar to what happened with the Nakam F4 last week. But yeah, so I'm not going to talk about it because I didn't actually watch it, and since I normally don't follow Brazilian F4 that closely anyway, what's the point? A feeder series I do follow, though, is the Formula Regional Americas. Now, if you know anything about this, it's impossible to watch every round because not every round is actually broadcasted. But the few rounds that I have watched, we've seen this young Kiwi, Callum Edge, dominate everybody, and we've seen it not only here, we've seen him do really well in the Porsche Cup Australia, we've seen him do really well over the winter in the Oceania Formula Regional Series. So if you don't know him, Callum Edge, keep an eye out. He is really, really quick. Yes, the grid in Formula Regionals America is pretty small and not super stacked by any means, but that's why he's not just winning, that's why he's been dominating most of the year. Just the amount of gold on this screen, I think, shows pretty well why he is an interesting prospect, even though he is competing in a subpar category. Obviously, I don't think he's Formula One bound. I mean, it's just not really the career trajectory he's been on at all. He's never competed in Europe as far as I know, but he definitely looks like somebody who's gonna have a look at IndyCar in the near future, to at least give their feeder series a go. I think he's tested in the next car recently, so maybe that's where he's headed. Beyond Callum Edge, Ryan Sheehan is pretty interesting, but he has had a last weekend to forget. He still secured P2, but got caught up in all sorts of weird, messy scenarios, and that was the end of that. The real two highlights from the weekend was, first of all, Oliver Westling stealing a win from Callum Edge in the final corner of a race, which was ridiculous to see, and the type of, if you were to shoot a movie about racing, that's the type of move that you put in there, and then all the race fans go, oh yeah, that was way too good, that would never happen in real life, and then, he just went out and did it in real life, so yeah, there we go. Mad, just madness, very good to watch. Unfortunately, usually the series doesn't provide that much entertainment, so maybe I was just starved for some proper action. And then the other big revelation, and now I have to look up his name, Cole Clack, was really quick. And okay, apparently it wasn't his debut, apparently he did compete around mid-Ohio, but he got his first podium in the category in only his second ever race weekend then, I suppose. And overall, he was really quick. He was battling with Sheehan and Becklin and Westling in one of the races, I believe, on pace. He couldn't quite keep up with them once they got past, so definitely not quite the same race pace just yet, but quick enough and good enough racecraft to keep him occupied for a long time, and I mean in race one long enough to just bring home a podium, so keep an eye out for him. The commentators were at least suggesting he was going to do a full season next year, so I am very much looking forward to that. One of the more interesting newcomers in that series. The other series that finished was F4 Americas or F4 USA, never mind. And Patrick Woodstoff secured the title. I can't even remember. Let me quickly see. I think he secured his title before this race weekend even. I'm not entirely sure. Even if he didn't, you can see the point gap for yourself. It was more or less a done deal. He's been the class of the field and he showed it again this time. But I just want to point out how the field is just really, really solid all around. Like the top half of this grid, we now have a decent benchmark with Ariel Alkin over from Europe, obviously, for the end of the season now. And we know he is, I'd say, a very mid-tier F4 driver, is fair to say. In Italian F4, he's, flirting with the idea of points at most times, but he doesn't really convert. But he's also in a bad car, so it is one of those, I think he'd be scoring consistently if he was in a Prema, let's put it that way. I think he'd be on that sort of maybe Alder level. There or thereabouts. And he came over to this series, and he's been well in the top 10, fighting for podiums, but it's not like he's just had an easy time. Now, the P9 was a big recovery drive. He had to come from the back of the grid, so that was still a really impressive drive in its own right. But nevertheless, it shows that, okay, this isn't the sort of grid where any decent European driver just comes over and walks all over it. This is actually, the sharp end of this grid is very competitive. So the names I want to point out there is obviously Patrick Woodstoff, the season winner. Then both Sherlock and Satoshi Ripa are always there at the sharp end as well. Lacey is Lacey and Costello both, I'd say, and now actually let me throw, Lacey, Costello, and Carrera, all three of those are just frustrating drivers. Like, you can just tell they need a bit more maturing. They are very inconsistent in their weekend to weekend performance, and then just getting very costly accidents. Like, look at Sharippa. He's won a lot of races, and then he's had three non-scoring rounds in a mid-tier field. He has the pace to even come back through the field if he fucks up once. That's the whole thing. So you shouldn't be having those type of results, really, and they are avoidable, but I'm sure they are going to grow into this really quickly. I don't know whether they plan to stay for another year or move on, but either way, like, in this whole field, you can at least keep an eye out for, I'd say, like, the top 7 or top 8. Jorge is sort of the cutoff where he's picked it up over the course of the season. He's turned into a proper driver towards the end of the year now. Below that, people are a bit dodgy, at least those I've completed the full season. So just in case, if you want a picture of what's going on here, that's about it. Then, more F4 news. Last but not least in this category, the Indian F4 series has finally launched with, was it a year, was it 2 years, with a few years delay, but we are finally here, and unfortunately the field is not quite as competitive as I had hoped for, as in, after seeing the announcements, this is exactly what I expected, but before the grid was announced, I'd hoped for a bit more European participation, maybe over the winter. Maybe that'll come in future years, maybe it won't. The local drivers are all a bit underwhelming so far. Mainly it was, what's his first name? Rishan Rajiv. Has done really well. He's showed proper pace. Like, he is almost quick enough to go with Webster and, why am I blanking, and Akshay Bora. Those two, obviously, I mean, Cooper Webster second in the GB4 Championship, Akshay Bora doing really well in the Italian F4 Championship and Euro F4. So those are top tier F4 drivers. Bora in particular, he is clearly the season favorite, I'd say, until Gouda comes into play, and then obviously he has missed weekends already. So yeah, for me, Akshay Bora the favorite, even though Webster has maybe won a race more. This also has to do with Akshay Bora getting a penalty in the third race though, so he won on track in the third race, but the way he overtook Webster was, let's say, maybe not entirely clean, and got penalized after the fact. So I think this still holds up. Bora is still clearly the favorite. Webster is a clear-cut favorite for P2. And then over the long run, I guess, based on the current performance, I'd expect Rajiv to be up there if it stays this particular grid. But yeah, overall, slow start to the series, I'd say, but I guess it was expected. Okay, now, not many news, as I said before, but we have a few. Namely, Prema announces Yugo Yukichupu for 2024 FRECA program. This is interesting because he also obviously did a bunch of F3 postseason testing, but yeah, it turns out that was just for the Macau race, and he's not actually going to do F3 next year, which is good. I'm glad he's staying with Prema. I think that's better than going to a subpar F3 team, really. That was a very dodgy, or would have been a very dodgy decision, I think. And he first of all probably needs the development. This F4 season wasn't as convincing as I had hoped for, maybe. And also he's got a really good chance at the title, obviously, if he goes to FRECA. He will have to compete against Kamara. That'll probably be the main rival. And then let's see who's going to fill that third Prema seat. But either way, Yugo will have a good chance to do well and makes FRECA more exciting. So yeah, just wanted to point all of this out in case you've missed it. And then we've got Dennis Hauger resigning with MP Motorsports for 2024 for his F2 campaign. This is interesting because, I mean, after losing the Red Bull Junior backing, I did not quite expect him to stay around, because what's the point? But then again, where else would he go? He clearly still thinks he's got something with MP there. He's happy with the team. He's happy with how they support him. So I mean, if he stays, then, and I think he said so himself in this interview, but it's clear from the outside as well, as a third year, if you're staying, you're just there to compete for the title and nothing else. I'm not entirely sure if he's going to be able to do that in an MP, but obviously we've got very recent examples of this working exceptionally well, so who knows? I'm not super excited about this announcement by any stretch. But then again, he had a really unlucky F2 season, so I guess well, he'll have a good shot at least being in the title fight this time around. Actually winning it will be a bit of a tall task, in my opinion. But either way, he's going to be a very, very good benchmark for Colapinto. Yeah, MP lineup looking really good. I'm happy, but I don't know where this journey goes for Hauger really long term. Is he going IndyCar? Is this the next step? Is this just a really bad segue over to this news over here, which is Grosjean, who, well, obviously there was the Andretti contract drama, and it's now been confirmed he's actually signed for Junkers Hollinger for next year, replacing Callum Ilott in the process. This is a move which I like and dislike at the same time, and just very simply, there's the two sides to this move. I like keeping Grosjean in the series, but I despise getting rid of Ilott for it. Ilott is a super exciting young rookie. He definitely deserves to stay in the series. Ideally, he'd deserve to stay in the series in a better car. And quite frankly, I think Grosjean would have been just fine to stay at Andretti. I think they sort of let each other down. Maybe it's best to go separate ways. Grosjean definitely had his Grosjean moments over the course of the year. Equally, Andretti definitely fucked him over more than once as well. So, you know, it is a weird one. I'm a bit sad he's downgrading as much. Will he ever get his first win in the Hollinger? I'm not convinced, let's just say. But yeah, I'm mostly concerned with will Ilott find another good seat, because otherwise that'll be a bit of a crime. If we're leaving out Vips for next year, at least leave Ilott. Come on, I need something to root for other than this lovely guy. And obviously all the other lovely guys over there as well. Really, I'm not sure why I'm complaining. As always, I do root for about half the grid, as long as it's not Stingray Rob. Yeah. Okay. Karting, as always, a bit of a highlight every weekend when it happens. Inconsistent with its delivery and inconsistent with its schedules, but nonetheless a great season finale for the WSK Euro Series. Calling it a season finale with only 2 rounds for the season is a bit, you know, I'm not convinced it's the best marketing strategy. I always struggle to remember who actually won the championships, hence we're going to look at it in a second. But yeah, we can just look at it as a individual race weekend and enjoy it from that point of view. Well, there was 4 categories I paid attention to. There was the national OK and OKJ categories as well, but we are going to ignore those because I haven't followed those at all so far this year. Now, for the regular for the regular mini under 10 years old series, we have Alexander Legenki, I don't know why I struggle so hard with this name, wins yet another final this year. I have to say yet another final because this guy has been winning a lot of things this year in the under 10 category. I want to say he's been winning almost everything, but he hasn't won this title, so I can't. But yeah, keep an eye out for Alexander Legenki. You'll see him around quite a bit more in the near future. He lost the title to P2 in this little series, which is Daniel Miron Lorente. I remember him as Lorente. He's always, you'll find his name as Myron, the name with M more often than Lorente, so just don't be alarmed if you can't ever find him on any sort of lists of good, well, karting drivers to keep a lookout for. Don't want to spend too much time with the under 10 final. We can have a quick look at this, the proper mini group 3 final. So as always, BCC Bogdan Cosmo Christopher right in the mix, just as his brother is in the OK Juniors. We've talked about him last week. Whenever he's racing, he is in win contention in this class. Again, just somebody to keep a lookout for. Really, sort of I don't want to say dominated the field because Waltz was there with him the entire time, but he looked in control. He also has been very good throughout the entire weekend, not just in the final. So yeah, just a super solid driver, and from this grid, for me, clearly the most interesting guy to keep a lookout for. So it makes sense that he's won. Now, OK Junior, one of the categories where it starts to get, we start to have a lot less domination at the sharp end. We start to have a lot more spread out battles across the field, and there's quite a few names I want to highlight from this list. So we see Jacopo Martinez won the final. He's won quite a lot over the year. He's been together with Lewis Werrell and Bondarev. Yeah, I think those three were sort of the big three over the year. I might be forgetting somebody. There was obviously Van Langendonk and Ramakers. There's quite a few good OK Junior drivers. But so yeah, Martinez winning a final, not the first time this year. Let's just put it that way. He's been quick. Then we have Filippo Sala in P2. Bit of a surprise, but then again, he also didn't take it on the road. He just finished P3 on the road, and Niklas Schaufler got a penalty. He is really the guy I want to highlight most, because he's had one of those super promising but never quite actually gets it over the line sort of years, if you know what I mean. He's been really, really quick during a lot of weekends. He's been a bit mediocre during a lot of weekends as well. Always a finals candidate, but his pace varies drastically from in win contention to very midfield in a final kind of guy, like scrapping around in the top 15 sort of area. This weekend, definitely on the quicker side of this, he's dominated as far as I can tell throughout the weekend, really leading up to the pre-final. He smashed the pre-final as well. He started this race from pole, and then obviously only lost a single position on the road, really, during very tricky, rainy final conditions. And had a little incident, so got penalised down to P3. But still, this is finally one of the rare times where he gets rewarded for the pace he's shown at stages. Really, like his World Championship, for example, was really frustrating, and a lot of his European Championship equally just really frustrating. In general, he is a bit better during the WSK weekends, it feels like. Then we've got, the usual heavy hitters. Roman Kamiap, I want to point out, up there in the top 4. That's a bit of a rare sight and was really nice to see. I haven't really paid much attention to him before at all. So uncharacteristically strong, I'd say. Then we've got a bit of the usual Time Saleh, DCC, Freddie Lloyd over from the... we saw him, we talked about him last weekend during one of the single make events as well, so he is a known good boy. And then we had, that sounds like he's a dog, I don't he's a known quick racing driver, quick fast Freddy, or a new fast Freddy is what they call him, I suppose. And then obviously we had Dries van Langendonk and Lewis Werrell fighting down in P11 and P12. That's very unusual, very rare sight. I haven't seen the entire weekend. I don't even think it has been broadcast, really. I've only watched the pre-finals and the finals. I don't know if they've just been fucked over in quali or if they just lacked a lot of pace. But judging from them struggling to make their way to the front of the grid, I'd say the pace also just wasn't quite there with the package, really, this time around. Forza Racing maybe just dropping the ball a bit now towards the end of the year, because I was very... If it's just on the drivers, then at least it is a very weird coincidence. Let's just put it that way. Okay, last but not least, the OK final. The OK grid in this series not really super stacked, as you can see. They didn't even get to a full 36 karts during the final, never mind before. So maybe not the most impressive feat to win here. Nevertheless, I want to point out... we've got a Russian 1-2. That's rare enough in and of itself, with Anthony Kavalkin and Kirill Kutskov at the top. And Kutskov got the title, I do remember this much. He's also the reigning world champion after winning the super chaotic and great to watch and unfortunately injury-heavy OK final this year in the World Championship. So... that's a really strong drive from both. Very dominant as well, as far as I remember. They really gapped the rest of the pack. I'm just happy Walter David on P3 is a bit like what I said earlier about Niklas Schaufler. also the kind of driver who is clearly quick and he's clearly got the pace. I think he's due to give his single-seater debut soon if he will step up. And keep an eye out for him once you see him in one. He's a quick driver, but man, so much bad luck and then inconsistencies at a few times where it wasn't bad luck. So really glad that he finally got it over the line. Similarly, but sort of the reverse, is Hannah Salim, who is always very, very good and like at the very, very sharp end leading up to the final and then drops down during the final. Bit sad it happened again. I believe he started P2 maybe. I can't even quite remember, but he started on the front row, I'd say, and just struggles to stay there even with drivers around him drop in bad conditions and everything. So yeah, that was just, as always, frustrating to watch, and I hope he gets it together a bit more next year. Yeah, I think that about covers the karting section. I'm just quickly scanning if I missed anything important. Obviously, we can have a quick look at who won the actual series in case you're interested. So, as I said, we have Kutskov won. We actually have a Russian. I believe they're all Russian. Don't quote me on this. Could be... Let me actually see. Yes. Oh, okay. Yeah, I was actually correct there. I remembered something. We've got a Russian 1-2-3, with Kutskov winning out of Kavalkin and Matveev. Then in the OK Junior category, due to winning the final, it was Martinez who actually also won the championship. So there we go. Told you he knows what he's doing. Time Sali, probably the most promising German prospect on anywhere on the karting ladder at the moment. It is a bit not a great time for German karting talent, at least internationally. I don't watch the German karting championship. Maybe they're all just stuck over there and they'll do just fine. That series has produced a lot of good drivers in the past. And yes, Niklas Schaufler at least P3 in the championship. Glad he got to bank that good result, as I said. In the mini 3, we have BCC takes the title ahead of William Kalaja. I don't like that name. I don't like pronouncing that name. I love that name. It looks good. And Devin Waltz. Yeah, exactly. Those two, Waltz and BCC, as I said, clearly the top two this weekend. And then we have India under 10s. Yeah, okay, I got that one right as well. Yeah, Lorenta winning ahead of Leganki. Okay. That's about it. Yeah, there is the OKN and OKJN category. They are sort of new classes in case you don't know, and I'm not sure if they are actually now the big thing or not. Like those during the events that I follow, so for example the WSK series, the grids are still pretty small, which usually is a bad sign. So yeah, I'll give it a year or two until I actually get into this series proper, or into this category proper, if it stays around. Okay. Well then, last but not least, the two-wheel category, as always, a highlight towards the end. And unlike last time when I tried talking about Moto 2 and Moto 3, actually this time a series I did watch over the year, which is JuniorGP. Much easier to follow because not as many rounds, it's not as packed. I didn't follow the other categories during the weekend either. I didn't follow the Talent Cup. I didn't follow the European Moto 2. I am just looking for JuniorGP and sort of, trying to work my way into the Moto feeder ladder from bottom up. Because with this method, I'll now know basically most of the Moto 3 drivers this year, with like the crossover of good drivers. Next year, obviously, of crossover from good drivers last year, plus them coming in. Yeah. Anyway, first things first, the feel-good part was Adrian Cruces winning a race finally during the final weekend. He actually won. I have to just double check, not lying. No, he got both wins as well. It was a doubleheader weekend, and really good stuff now that he actually finished the season on the high that he's sort of been chasing. He changed teams halfway through the season and was threatening for a win ever since. He's got a couple of podiums. He's always been up there in the sort of lead pack fight towards the end of the race, but hasn't quite done it. Obviously, it might have helped him, the championship winner, or very dominant championship winner, I want to say, Piquera's already secured his title last time out, so he didn't have to scrap quite as hard. He didn't really have to risk anything for a win, although I'm not sure these guys are probably not wired to think like this, especially not at their age. yeah, the races have delivered. The We had the unlucky thing of Luca Lunetta binning it on during the final during race one on the final lap, which is super sad. He could have maybe also gotten his first win of the season, and he just about messed it up both times. Basically, dropped down to P5, but yeah, overall these races have been really good. I don't know what I want to highlight really from the individual races. There's not much to say. It's the classic Moto3 drafty race. Really, there's two things to this. Know who are the lead pack riders that'll always shuffle up towards the front, and then you just check who actually wins a lot. Well, you go watch who actually wins a lot and who's capable of consistently getting to the front of the pack when it matters. But it still feels like the specific results do have a very random factor to it, as all these draft heavy series have. Like, it's a skill thing if you're P3 or P10, but it's probably a bit of a luck thing, or not luck, but you know what I mean. Luck is involved, or fortunate timing is involved in actually then winning those races and finishing P4 over like P6, even though you could only be a couple hundredths apart on the line. Okay. Let me just quickly pull up the standings. Yeah, there they are. Standings, yeah, exactly. Okay, because again, similarly to US, I thought I'd feel confident to give a little assessment of these people of the grid, or where the cutoff of good to meh to very question mark is. From those two, obviously, Piquera's won the title. No, nothing to say there. Dominant rider in the context of this category. Luca Lunetta has the caveat of we don't know if he is slightly outriding the bike or vice versa, because his teammate is nowhere, but he's been very consistent throughout the year, but not really one to actually win races. Carpe, I'm actually struggling to remember if he won a race. It looks like he also he was fighting for a win in race one this weekend and didn't get it. No, he just about missed out on the win every time, but he was a rider very much in win contention, and also a bit of a lonely guy in his team. His teammates were nowhere in comparison, and so that lifts him up a bit more, in my opinion. Esteban, very impressive, just because he is, I believe, the youngest on the grid, and also one of the few proper rookies, and has outscored both of his teammates. He's won a race, I believe, which not both of his teammates have managed. Yeah, he's won a race, and while Rolston hasn't, for example. Really good, and actually he did have, he had a good bike, but he still managed to beat both of his teammates. So yeah, that was just an inspiring season to watch, really. Then, as Crucius we already talked about, then Suratuza, on the more frustrating side of the front runners, but still usually elite pack guy, rarely fighting for a podium, I'd say. He had a few, I believe. He had 2 wins actually, so fair enough, but he's not quite as heavily involved in the podium fights, if I remember correctly. Ralston usually is, but only during the first half of the race. He has not actually managed to convert it into a win. Carrera won the opening race of the season and has dropped off massively. I'd say he was then, the scores do reflect that he's been the worst of the Aspa Junior boys. And then there is David Almanza, who was, don't get confused by him being 9th. He was way better than 9th. He just hasn't done all the rounds. He was really, really quick, actually. Bit sad I wasn't there this weekend, but he's only won a single race, and he was just a very frustrating driver to watch again. Bit mistake prone, bit crashy. Clearly has raw pace though, so let's hope he sorts out the other things. I think he's also confirmed for Moto3, as are most of these top guys. Then we get into the sort of question mark territory of O'Shea, usually near the lead group, but struggles to keep in touch over race distance. Similar with a lot of these, actually. Boazri, Rosenthaler had one good race and then dropped off a cliff. Morosi has flashes of pace and then also doesn't show much. Could be a team thing, who really knows. But yeah, these are sort of the mid-tier riders. So yeah, I'd say the cutoff for these in terms of just pure class is very much either below 9, definitely drop between 9th and 10th, and then technically Almanza should be a bit higher, and you could say that like these three, 02, Ralston and Carrera, are also a bit more question marks than the others plus Almanza. Really, that's my assessment at least. I'm not an expert by any stretch, but let me know what you make of that if you follow the series, and if you don't, I'd recommend checking it out because it is exciting and a bit less, doesn't cost quite as much, quite as many hours or quite as much commitment to actually follow a full season compared to the actual Moto3 Championship, for example. Okay, either way, that's been a lot of talking, but I did enjoy it. Let me know what your favorite races was, what your favorite races were, rather, what I missed, for example. Let me know anything, really. Contribute to the discussion if you can. And otherwise, thanks for watching. Enjoy your week. And remember, racing is more than just F1.